If you are a parent or caregiver of an autistic person with an eating disorder, I have some exciting news for you. A few months ago, I announced that I was considering the creation of a group coaching program for parents and caregivers of autistic people struggling with eating disorders. Because I wanted to ensure this program was truly something that would be appreciated, I said that I would only create the program if there was enough genuine interest. Well, the genuine interest has been shown. Thanks to countless of you who signed up for the waitlist and filled in the questionnaire, I have officially decided to create the, drumroll please, Autistically ED-free Caregivers Group Coaching Program. Not only will this program include live coaching calls with me and other superhero supporters of autistic people with eating disorders, but you'll also have 24/7 access to a private community. And no, it's not on Facebook because, let's be honest, social media can get so distracting, and receive custom-created resources and handouts to maximize your understanding and ability to support those with both autism and eating disorders. As I create this program, I want to continually ensure it's curated to you and your specific needs, so your input is highly valuable. Get on the waitlist and share your experience by filling in your details at livelabelfree.com/group. And now, let's get back to today's episode.
Gotta put one foot in front of the other, and you'll be around the corner soon.
Welcome to Live Label Free, the podcast, where you'll learn to let go of limiting labels and embrace your unique brain. As my mom says so beautifully in her song, which is why on this podcast, you'll learn the scientific links between neurodiversity and eating disorders, giving you a deeper understanding of how you can face your fears and become truly free. Together, you and me, we will keep putting
one foot in front of the other.
Hello, and welcome back to the Live Label Free podcast. I'm your host, Livia Sara, and I have the most special guest with me here today, my mom, Louise Alexandra, or the singer-songwriter behind the song One Foot in Front of the Other that many of you have come to love as the podcast intro and outro music. And there are so many questions that we have from you listeners about what it was like being a mother of an undiagnosed autistic kid with an eating disorder. And me and my mom here are so incredibly excited to come together and share our lived experiences to help empower you. So with that said, Mama, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing back in het vaderland in Nederland?
Hello, my darling. Hello, schat, I have to say. I'm so honored and so humbled to be on your podcast. I've never been on a podcast before.
Really?
I didn't know that. This is my first podcast, and it's with my daughter. Like, imagine that. Well, I don't know if maybe some people never make it to a podcast, but I do. So I'm grateful, but not for the podcast, but for you.
Well, also for the podcast. So, yeah, I mean, let's just get started because we have a lot of questions to get through. And I'm just going to say from the start that, we are probably going to do a part 2 and even a part 3 if necessary, because there's so many parents out there, obviously that are struggling with this, because dealing with an eating disorder is hard enough. And then when there's underlying autism, which practically no medical professionals seem to understand, it can be really, really hard and really complex. That's why I think this label, too complex, just doesn't make any sense, because it's like, is there ever an instance where an eating disorder is simple? No.
Yes.
So,
no.
Okay, so I'm just going to start with the first question that comes from someone, ironically enough, named Liv. And Liv is based in the UK, and Liv asks, what was it like for you to see Livia going through an eating disorder? Did you seek support for yourself? And if so, how?
It's a very big question.
Yeah, let's start with, what was it like for you?
Okay, before this podcast, I told you that I was really nervous because I want to say it all, and I want to really help people through this podcast and through what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I feel like I need to be chronological and all that, but I'll just try to answer, what comes up for me.
Yeah.
Although I did make some notes.
I mean, it is complex, so it doesn't have to be chronological. It can be messy, and people can piece it together in however they want to.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I'm so honored to give my perspective, and it's quite a blessing. And I hope it will help Liv and other parents. Is Liv a parent or is Liv?
Liv is actually one of my clients.
Aha. Okay. So now that's great that she asked that question for me. So, of course, your book already speaks a lot about how it was for me, but it's, of course, from your perspective. And now I can say my perspective. And one of the aspects of this whole experience was to learn to understand and accept how you think. And you mentioned it's hard to deal with an eating disorder child that has autism, but I had no idea you had autism. I did not even have an idea what an eating disorder actually looked like,
Right.
People had talked about it, and I had no idea at all about any of these things when it happens, and then suddenly it happens, and it doesn't hit you like a truck, actually. It hits you slowly, insidious ways, and it kind of builds up and builds up, and you think it's not true, and you don't even know what it looks like. First, you don't even think it's an eating disorder, before you get to that point. Yeah. But at some point, well, you remember exactly how it went. But at some point, I thought there's something about this eating behavior of yours and all this running and exercising. And in the beginning, I thought it was really cute that we went running together. And Mom and Livia, you always like meters ahead of me.
Yeah, because I did 4 sports. I was that was my entire identity. And I think something that I've talked about a lot, also in my books that are just sitting there that need to still be published, is this idea of that, more so than letting go of the eating disorder, what was scarier for me was letting go of this, athletic, skinny, healthy person identity. It wasn't about, I need this illness, because I didn't see it as that, but I think I almost believe that my eating disorder was almost a solution to this existential crisis that I was unconsciously having as someone who never felt like they fit in. And I believed, if I can't do any of this social girly growing up stuff right, well, I figured out that, if I became the epitome of this perfect healthy eater and I could be the best athlete and I could win, the PACER test, which in Nederlands I've learned is test, then I felt like at least I have a purpose. At least I can know that I'm doing life almost quote unquote right, correctly. And I think that perfectionistic black and white underlying thinking in a lot of autistic people, just when you pair that together, of course, eating disorders are common and frequent in autistic people.
Yeah, I still am wondering also about the statistics. How many of people with an eating disorder actually have this autism component?
The statistics are bullshit curious. Because the statistics are based on the stereotype. So
the existing statistics. I'm sure it's very hard to actually even put a number on.
You can't even measure it because, so many eating disorders go undiagnosed, so much autism goes undiagnosed, and ultimately it's, again, semantics and labels which constrict us all the time to everything. That's why I don't even like statistics themselves, because how much of the deep complexity unknowingness of existence can you even measure in tangible entities?
I'm speechless. Yes. As often the case with you. I'm going to go back to the question, though, of Liv, because, I remember how it started was, as I said, it starts this insidious way. You were doing all this exercising and you were eating less and less. And it kind of occurred to me that there's something going on. And I think I would try to talk to you, but it was unapproachable subject, right? Because right from the start, it starts at this thing, but you cannot touch it. You cannot approach it. It's kind of a thing that it cannot be approximated. So then I remember calling our doctor, and we had an appointment with our nurse.
Natalie, right?
Yeah, Natalie, of course.
Natalie in Rainbow Girl.
In Rainbow Girls. Natalie, of course, we know her real name, and she was a really, really lovely, lovely person, lovely nurse. Natalie, I remember calling her in Brook when we lived in Brook Street, and I said, something's going on around eating and exercise, and there's something's wrong, and I'm worried. And I didn't really know what it would mean for us. I had no consciousness about eating disorders at all. And that started the whole unknown road, actually, of to Liv's question, full of desperation and ambiguity and guilt of like, what did we do wrong here? Yeah. Although we do have 2 other kids, but they were younger. So it's your first child who gets this, and it's like not knowing what is best to do, dealing with my own fear while trying to support you. It reminds me of this snowstorm that I was once driving in with Daddy, and you were in the back. We had Boston? Only 1 child. Yeah, we were going to Vermont, and it was a terrible snowstorm.
Oh yeah, welcome to Boston.
Yeah. We couldn't see a thing. Like, it was really white, nothing to be seen, not the edges of the road, and I thought I was going to die.
Oh, but, like I thought I was going to die when I was in that fucking storm in Bali with food poisoning all alone and couldn't even reach you.
Yes, that kind of fear. Yeah. And you were like in the back, you were crying, or you felt sick. I don't know, but you were like a baby. Mm-hmm. But here I was, fear for death. And I would turn around and say, it's going to be okay, sweetie. Yeah. It's going to be okay. And I think that's the mother thing that we do. We know we're in a dire situation, but we will tell our kids it's going to be okay. Although I did not always tell you it was okay, because I would sometimes be more fearful while you were also fearful, and it would not help you very much, I think.
And I think this is really interesting that you bring up this. You said, I thought I was I had failed as a parent. I thought I was broken. I thought I had done something wrong, that guilt feeling. That is something that comes up with every single parent that I work with, is this deep feeling of shame, that you failed as a parent. And even I get so many parents that come to me that say, for the first few months of when it started and when it was that insidious period, you don't even know something's wrong. You're just like, great, my kid is doing this stuff. They've found this little outlet for themselves. And then suddenly you realize they've lost all this weight, and you're like, holy fuck. How could I not have seen this? And I think, when you go to the doctors, we've done, the FBT, which we'll talk about, and the systeemtherapie in Nederland met freaking Hedwig and her squeaky mug. They make you, because I could tell they made you feel like bad parents. And even saying, if you don't put your kid into this clinic, you're making the worst decision. You have to trust us. You have to trust the professionals. And they push you in a corner. And I think, that is not talked about enough. But then again, I'm like, who is there to even talk about it? Because there's so much shame around it. So it's terrifying to talk about. So I'm curious for you if you can kind of elaborate on, how medical professionals almost did push you into a corner. And if you can elaborate on those feelings of guilt and shame, because I think that is going to validate a lot of parents out there who currently do feel like they've, quote unquote, messed up as a parent.
Right. Well, since when you start, thanks for that question. And I noticed that I made a lot of notes, and I feel like I should just shove them all aside, because actually the notes came from my head, right? I wrote them all down because I wanted to structure it. And now I feel like, my question. Oh, this is a question about the treatment. Oh, now I have to look at this paper, and I have to look.
So this is interesting what's happening. Why? Because this is the theme. It's trusting yourself, your instinct.
Exactly. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't find it. And I think I'm just now pushing them all aside. We can talk about later what we did or did not talk about, and we can do it in part 2. And I'm just going to answer from what's in me and what was in me all along, of course. Okay, you're saying the treatment. Well, when you start, it was same like when starting with going to Natalie, right? She was the first one who then checked the growth curve and saw that it wasn't right and that you were falling off it, even though you were always the smallest. And she was the first one who used the word eating disorder. And that was like, ooh, my God, no. Yeah. And of course, we had experience in both in America as in Holland. And I think it's crucial that treatment professionals, are aware of the full spectrum of eating disorder patients or kinds of people that are suffering from this, because I do believe there are different kinds, right? I do think there are people that really want to have this focus on losing weight. I do feel that exists, right?
Oh, totally. I have clients that have petrified of weight gain.
And of course, I thought that was true for you too, because we had all these nightly arguments. Remember that I said you have to grow and then you're going to get bigger a little bit when you were in the course of, having to gain weight. But you said, no, the proportion, you had all these arguments about the proportion and that it's not correct. And I could not follow it. And you could not follow me. I could not follow. I just didn't understand it. Your algorithms that were in your head of why you had to do these things.
Welcome to the autistic brain. Everything I do is an algorithm. I mean, from the moment I wake up, even now, I calculate, okay, so now I'm going to do my yoga, then I'm going to make my coffee, and then that's going to take exactly that many minutes. Then I'll have my breakfast, and I have this Zoom call with Mama at 10 a.m., so I need to make sure that everything is timed. My entire life is an algorithm. I've never even, used that word, but that's so accurate. And I think for me, again, the eating disorder, it was a way to make this intangible, unknowable human existence tangible, because autistic people, we have such a hard time, well, not just autistic people, anyone has a hard time comprehending the purpose of life and what it means to be human. And sometimes I have these moments where I'm like, whoa, everything is just an illusion. And because reality, like I said, an incomprehensible thing, we turn to tangible certainties in our life. And that's why, as humans, we hide behind labels. We say, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm a scientist.
Right.
Because when you strip all that away, it's like you don't know who you are. Okay, but yeah, I'm getting off topic here.
But darling, you're 24 now, but you were 10 or 11 at the time. And now you're, when you started resorting to this eating disorder behavior. And of course, the questions you're asking now about existentialism that you're relating to it are very deep and very big. And I wonder what it was that actually, no, because I'm serious, even though we've lived together for all this time. What triggered it then at age 11, right? When you don't ask, well, I remember as a child also looking at the stars and going crazy over where does it end and oh my God, and what is this world? But I'm not sure I had that at that age already. Did you?
Oh,
because you're very wise for your age.
Totally. And that's why I say, I believe that, fifth grade nutrition class, when I learned about, healthy food and, if you eat too much sugar, you're going to become obese and all this shit, I remember just being like, wow, here's life's purpose just landing on my lap. Of course, I wasn't able to phrase it as oh, this is my life's purpose. But looking back, 100% unconsciously, that what was going on in my brain. Because for as long as I can remember, I didn't like the small talk. I didn't like playing with dolls. I didn't like the chit chat. Why? Because there was no purpose for me. But when I played, that game of checkers on the first day of kindergarten with, what did I name her in my book? Lexi or Mila? One of the two. I was finally, there was actually a purpose in this game. That's why I wanted to play soccer outside with the boys. Because I was this is actually useful, So for me, inherently, unconsciously, everything I did had to have some sort of starting point and end point. There had to be proof that I could either win or lose at it kind of thing. And that's also with sports and musical chairs, I only ever played games that I knew I had a high chance of winning. Otherwise, no purpose. And
for other people who are not that way, it's just the playing is the purpose.
They're playing for the sake of playing, but for me, no, a game is meant to be played because you can win, right? And that's why when I lost, I remember we were playing Mensch Erg niet with
aggravation.
Mila or Mila or Lexi. I don't know which one it is because it's N, right?
I think it's Lexi.
Lexi, okay,
for sure.
Lexi, we were playing Mensch Erg niet, and I remember I was like, she's not even Dutch, so she's definitely gonna lose, That was my mind going into the game. But I was like, Lexi, let's play this game because you're going to love it. In my mind, you're going to lose. I'm going to win. It's going to be fine. But then she won. And I was so mad because I was like, this was the whole purpose of us playing was that I could prove that I could win and be the best. And I lost.
But what do you think about that now, that you thought that way? Because, of course, it's fine to also lose, right? Is my opinion.
Well, now, I think, but again, for me, because I felt so out of place and I could not place what was, quote unquote, wrong with me because of the autism, I turned to the tangible certainties. And the tangible certainties are winning.
It was really confusing, actually, to you to deal with this emotion of not being able to deal with the losing.
Right.
It was really, really, yeah, because in a way, if I hear it as an objective, that I'm your mother, like, wow, that's not very nice, to not be able to lose. I remember that you were having had a hard time losing. And then in Dutch, we say that you're, how do you say it again? Je kan niet tegen je verlies. Yeah, you can't, je kan niet tegen je verlies. And that's a really bad, if you can't stand losing, it's a bad trait, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, in English too,
yeah.
American everywhere, losing is a bad trait. And I think at the time,
not being able to lose is a bad trait.
It was so attached to my identity. And that's kind of, again, where the eating came in. It's like I had this identity that I had labeled as this is correct. This is a right identity. And when I lost, well, what did that make me in my mind? That made me a loser. And I could not identify with being a loser. And I think that's the danger. It wasn't inherently about losing the game. It was what I made of that losing itself.
Yeah. So I'm learning actually even now again. So it had to be the outcomes had to be predictable. Yeah. So it was the same like when you went to parties, we went to a party or we would go out for dinner and then you would come in to the place and you would already say, when are we leaving?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Because it was like, it was uncertain. And or to go even further, it was intangible again. And what is, healthy eating? What is exercising? What is all these routines that become an eating disorder? Tangible entities, right?
So it gave you something to hold on to. Yeah, so it gave you something to every day be able to calculate, to be able to do, to have a purpose. Yeah. Well, I do recognize, sorry.
And that's why I keep bringing up this philosophical existential stuff, because looking back now with the wisdom and insight that I've gained from reading so many books about Zen and what it means to not know and what it means to truly be in meditation and all that, is, I'm finally, in a way, just like discovering I was autistic allowed me to place my eating disorder in a more accurate way. Like these existential insights help me to place, growing up, like make sense of it almost, which is ironic because what does it mean to make sense of something, But I think, it is really important to have this conversation because I work with parents, and when I talk to them about their kids, like I was recently talking to some parents and their kid made up this whole imaginary world and said like, this girl's 14 and she was saying like, you guys are an illusion. How do I know you're my real parents? Like, how do I know that what's real and what's not real? And I was just like, wow. This isn't just unique to me. Like so many autistic kids, I think, grow up having this innate sense of like, what is the purpose of life? Having these existential thoughts. Again, with the purpose and the eating disorder, it makes a lot of sense because an eating disorder makes everything so simple and easy and reduces the overwhelm that come with infinite choices.
Right. Yeah. And I wonder also if other parents recognize that, right? I have one thing that I had to look because I did write that down and I thought I would remember it, but
it's
the way
fine
I wrote
if you look at your notes.
Yeah. No, see, I'm just like you. No, I said I wouldn't look at my notes, and now I can't look at my notes.
The black and white thing, and I think the black and white thinking is also applicable to this win-lose idea, right? If I am someone who's like, I'm a winner, I always win everything, and then I lose, and it's like, well, which one am I? And then it's like, I can't be both. I have to be one or the other. And I think, again, that's really hard to find the nuance in that, when you're autistic.
Yeah. You said, actually, it was one moment in Cape Cod in 2000.
Oh, I know what you're going to say. At the lake house,
yes. Right? And you said to me in this quiet moment, I was laying next to you and you had had a difficult night or something. And I was able to soothe you. But you said, Mama, I don't want to grow up. I'm so afraid to grow up. And somehow that moment, I remember it so well because it felt as if a light was shining on that moment and as if I'd been told a big secret that held the key that I could use somehow, but I didn't know how I could use it. I felt like this is an important statement. This is really key to what's going on, but I didn't know what it meant, right?
Right.
Just like now, you actually self-discovered your autism, well, with the help of that book that I bought but didn't even read, or I tried to read it, didn't appeal to me. And then you recognized yourself in there. We can talk about it later. Asper girls, right? But I remember in the beginning, or later on, you also go back and maybe other parents recognize that too. When you were little, you would and it's in your book. You line up all the shoes in the hallway to color and size.
Teletubbies.
Yeah, you would want everything in a series, or you would draw only rainbows and castles, things that are like, symmetrical
and make
or
sense and are
yeah.
consistent and are the same.
I didn't know until I had a second child and I'm not saying you're not creative because you're very creative,
No, but that
but
draws the
then,
most chaotic thing.
yeah, but then the next one, May, she would draw, and Amelie too, they draw like more associative things, right?
Yeah.
Like more like, well, May, especially people hanging out of windows in houses, doing all kinds of things, different scenes,
Typical
and
May.
yeah, and not castles and rainbows. But only when you have then another child, you see that there's actually very, very, very different characters between
Right.
all of them. And
Yeah.
that's why you also know that when you develop an eating disorder, that this is not a parent blaming thing.
No.
Of course, it has an effect how you're raised, but it is really an intrinsic character, an innate kind of propensity,
and
I would
think,
say.
And at the same time, I think it's interesting, like the nature-nurture conversation, because I know that not everyone who has an eating disorder or who gets an eating disorder is like the oldest or even like has siblings. Like I know a lot of like only children who have eating disorders, but like I definitely say at least 60 to 70% of the time when you look at like families, gezinnen, where there are like multiple children, 60 to 70% of the time, at least, if it's not more, the oldest one has the eating disorder. And, there are so many books written on like the sibling sequence or however that the birth sequence,
Birth
which is,
order, yeah.
again, you can't even measure this because, I mean, you can't. Like, obviously, you can't even accurately measure that because birth is random and gender is random and all that stuff. But I just think it's worth mentioning that that is a trend I don't,
That the oldest has
yeah.
it.
And there are like theories on why that is, the responsibility and someone actually, a therapist that I was talking to of one of my clients, she was telling me how the client that I'm about to work with, who's 14, this one who said her parents were an illusion and everything, that when I was born, I was a part of a different family than when May and Emily came along. Because first it was a family of 3, it was just me, and then when May and Emily come along, they are literally born into a different family. And I thought that the way she said that was just fascinating and just in a way that I had never heard before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's true for every child, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
And
there
it's,
are, of course, second children or third children who get an eating disorder, and while the oldest doesn't, because the propensity of the character also plays a role, of course.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, I mean, of course, the character, and I think it's the perfectionism, the black and white thinking, the
And the
all or
genetics.
nothing, that like has to be encoded into your DNA. Because, I mean, if you and daddy were truly the horrible refrigerator parents that couldn't care less about your kids, then all of us would have some sort of horrible illness, mental disease, right? And May and Emily didn't get an eating disorder. I mean, I remember when I was living in Holland last year and I came over and you and Emily were on a diet and I was like, okay. And then a week later I came and I was like, Emily, how's your diet going? She's like, oh yeah, I stopped, couldn't do it. And that is just, I like laughed in myself because I was like, that's totally like the character difference there. She was like, yeah, can't do it. Anyways.
And I must say that hearing that, like if parents hear this, being on a diet with your daughter is something I would not recommend somehow at all. You know what I mean? Like part of me when I did that South Beach diet when I was, I don't know, when we lived on Brook Street,
No, it wasn't in Brook Street. It was in Cambridge. I remember the South Beach diet book.
Part of this is one of my blame things. It's like, I did this, I went on a diet and then I ate all this stuff that was forbidden and allowed. And I think you were the only one. No, a part of me had that thought. I mean, I discarded it later. I think it wasn't me to blame for that
I
diet.
mean, I'm very instinctual and like trusting my gut, and I can like guarantee you that you being on that diet like did not affect me because I think like we live in a world where diet culture is just everywhere without us even knowing it half the time. And most parents that I know were on a diet when I like went to have play dates or had been on a diet. And
and what's a diet anyway? Than putting a few rules on what you eat to yourself because you want to feel more healthy. Yeah,
Right.
It's not like
because,
it's bad or anything.
Technically, I could say I'm on a what works for my body diet.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then it's
Yeah.
again semantics and labels.
Yeah.
I think diet, like the danger of what people say when we use that typical term diet is just restricting ourselves of things that we want. And we feel like we can solve this equation almost by putting rules onto it and saying, if I'm not allowed to have that. But I think,
Right.
If dieting worked, we wouldn't have like anti-diet recovery books because we wouldn't need those things. Anyways,
Yeah.
so
We went a little bit in a different direction, but
yeah.
we did talk about siblings. And I think somehow it is so important that we write a book about siblings
I
and
saw
an
that in your
eating
notes, like
disorder. Yeah.
with May and Emily. And I mean, we
And
still
maybe
have
other
that.
families too, to research, because a lot has happened.
Yeah.
And I mean, there is definitely, trauma left over and,
Yeah.
from that period. And yeah, of course, not to make you feel guilty, but you know that
No,
there
but
that there is trauma.
this phrase, what you're saying, not to make you feel
Yeah,
guilty.
I hate that sentence. I just
No, but
said that, but
no, but what I'm saying is like,
it's
because again, I have grown so much as a person that
that
I
you can hear it.
recognize and understand that no one can make me feel any kind of
No,
guilt.
I know, and you're so because you know what I also hate when people say, yeah, not
No offense.
yeah, no offense, but, and then the offense comes, right? I
Right.
mean, it's like I say, oh,
No
not to
offense,
make you
but
feel
I hate
guilty, but
you.
here's something to make you feel guilty, and it's like, and
No, but
that's
like
obviously not what I mean.
even if you think it's gonna make me feel guilty, whether or not innately feel guilt in my body is my decision.
Exactly. You're so wise. So the thing is, there is trauma, and there might be some. Here, I wrote it here down. Yeah, Amelie was 5 when it started. Oh yeah, this is that story.
With the what is anorexia or whatever.
Yeah, it was. She was very worried, and she didn't. What Amelie didn't like, and I think she still has that she doesn't like that things are an anomaly, right?
Yeah.
She didn't like that our family would be different. Like
Oh,
that,
she still.
yeah, because no one else had this. Why do we have to have this? And then she told her friend that her sister was very sick and it was very bad, and no one had that. It was very rare and it was just very strange, and it was
Like a
called
rare genetic
anorexia.
disease.
And then the next day, he said that he had heard about it, and indeed, he heard it was very bad to have dyslexia.
Oh my
That is such
God.
an anecdote. In other words, the kids had no understanding of it whatsoever, right? And they wouldn't understand any other disease either at that age, right? I
Right.
mean, very young. But Amelie asked me when it would be over. And I promised her that it's going to be fine, honey. It will pass. And we were working on it. But then, yeah, it was painful that my promise was broken every year for many, many years,
Yeah.
right? And the only one who could make it pass was either, well, I don't want, yeah, it was this, I don't know, this should be cut out because I don't know where I'm going with it, but it was you who could resolve yourself, but you needed help. And it is Amelie who judges it to be a bad situation, if we get very deep into it now.
Right, but you just said we need to cut this out, but I'm like, no, this is good. We're not
I know,
cutting
but
this
it's
out.
like, it's so deep because
it is fucking deep.
Yeah, it is fucking deep. No, because like it's this trauma that you have because something happens that is awful, and of course all the mess that we had around it, the fighting, the kitchenware.
That's part of it. That's part of it. I don't know any family or anyone at least that I know and my clients that like haven't had these situations where plates have been smashed into the wall and bruises have been given because this is a violent illness. There's no
Right.
sugarcoating that. No pun intended.
No, true.
So anyways, I do think it is important that we talk about the FBT because we're definitely not going to get into all these questions today. We will have to do, again, like I said, part 2, part 3, whatever, how long this takes. But I really think that FBT is such an important thing to talk about because in all the parent Facebook groups also that I'm in on autism and eating disorders, I would say 80% of it is about like FBT failed us, FBT is horrible. What do you do if your kid is not responding to FBT? Did you know that my book Rainbow Girl has a new subtitle? What was first My Journey to Living Life in Full Color is now a memoir of autism and anorexia. While the previous title was catchy and fun, it wasn't overly clear what my book was about, which is my story growing up undiagnosed autistic, how this led to me developing what looked like anorexia but was actually a manifestation of underlying autism, the battles I had to face in the healthcare system, including being traumatized by family-based therapy, aka FBT or the Maudsley method, and the gaslighting of having an eating disorder that doesn't quite fit within any of the boxes medical professionals try to squeeze you in. But more importantly, Rainbow Girl is a story of resilience and strength, one that illustrates how no matter what life throws at you, you can and will find freedom. Whether you're a parent or caregiver of someone with an eating disorder, a healthcare professional, or just a lost soul trying to find their way, Rainbow Girl is guaranteed to leave you feeling hopeful and empowered. Grab your copy of either the paperback, ebook, or audiobook, which was recorded by yours truly, at livelabelfreebooks.com, on Amazon, at Barnes & Noble, or wherever you buy books. And now, let's get back to today's episode. So, the question from Eli, again in the UK, which is actually another one of my clients, asks, what was your view of FBT when it was first proposed to you? Let's just start there.
Yeah, so let's start there. So imagine that started when we're in the middle of it, right? We're in the middle of your eating disorder and in the middle of the madness. So the treatment professionals tell you all these things and that you have to put up boundaries. If you don't do this, then that will happen. And if you don't do that, then, well, one of those approaches with the boundaries that they called so-called evidence-based treatment.
Evidence-based.
Was this family-based treatment. And then I also have to tell you this story about how I was kicked out of that Facebook group in relation to that.
I actually read about that story in one of my recent books that I wrote that still needs to get published because it was the epitome of confirmation bias.
Yeah, it's quite disturbing actually, right? So here I am. So we have the FBT experience with you. So the FBT, for anybody listening, it's where the parents have to take complete control. It's the idea that the child cannot cope with this control and has a control issue. And that's why you're not doing yourself, you're harming yourself by your control issue. So the parents have to take it away from them. Yeah. And take the control and basically make you eat like a little child again, as you should from the beginning. And so that's what the parents need to do. And if you do that, you will make it through it, you will gain weight, and you will be able to be so relieved because you don't have this control issue anymore, because you're taking care of it, parents. You're actually helping your child. It's going to be great. It's going to be good for you as a family.
It's going to be great.
It's going to be great. Yeah, so come on, let's all do it. Okay, so it's a really hard thing because the parents have to, and of course we're devoted, so we want to do everything, and we latched on to anything the professionals were saying. So we showed up, we ate with the group, we learned about all the portioning, and we had to control every bite that went to your mouth. But there's a lot of resistance because you don't like to do what you're told.
And I think the term demand avoidance is worth mentioning here too, because I mean, even still, if someone tells me I have to do something, I'm like, you bet I'm not going to do that thing just because you asked me to.
Right. So the more we try to do that FBT, the harder it got and the more tension there was. So at the time, I felt so tense and anxious, and it was as if my blood had to run into the reverse direction because it was just not normal, and it was exhausting. It didn't help our relationship either with you, and also
trust,
and between the parents. You remember, that scene in the book also where you didn't believe the volume, right, in the measuring
milk
cup.
Oh, that's so funny. I actually just translated that yesterday in the Dutch version of Rainbow Girl.
The maatbeker.
Kan je het alsjeblieft, kan je de melk alsjeblieft opnieuw opmeten?
Yeah.
So, and that's
also
actually
between the
another
parents.
question. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, that's another question for anyone listening. Who Leslie says, trust can be difficult because in the past there have been a lot of lies. How can we encourage honest communication? I mean, I just want to state that question, not to go into a new answer, but just to, I think this FBT and this trust piece go hand in hand. The honesty and that honest communication she's talking about go hand in hand. And I think FBT, part of the reason it is so harmful, especially for autistic people with demand avoidance, is that it totally destroys any possibility of having honest communication with your child.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, that was one of my counter questions to you, because in retrospect, I discuss this often also with Amelie, for instance, is like, how would we do it differently, right? This time, knowing what we know now. And if you're in that situation, this also for the parents listening, because it's not some easy formula to get out of this when you're in that state or when your child is in that state, right?
Right. And
it's
I think
very hard.
And here I think that phrase of, if it sounds too good to be true, it often is actually so applicable to FBT. Because as you were just like explaining it to me, like even like obviously I know what it is, but how you were sharing, like, okay, so the kid can't handle their control, they have control issues, so the parents just take the control and the kid is gonna eat again and listen to them and gain weight and everything's gonna be la la la, hunky dory.
Yeah.
I'm like, in theory, that sounds like a magical fairy tale.
Right.
But the fact
it's
that
awful.
It does sound like that makes it highly probable that it is an illusion and cannot be reality. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, if it was that easy to just be like, here, like, kid, like, just take that control. I'm just gonna take the control from you. Just hand it over.
Come on, we would give you a string cheese and you would string it and
up
put
and
it
hide
in your underwear or put
Yeah.
it in the couch. So, I mean, yeah, it's a huge pressure cooker, no pun intended, situation. And it also gives a lot of tension with you and between parents also. So I applaud all the couples that stay together through all this. That's a whole other story.
And the couples that do not stay together, there's nothing wrong with you.
There's so that's true too.
And
but
just
it
on the
is a lot of
FBT,
tension.
really quick though, that theory that we've been talking about, like in theory it sounds great, just goes to show that whoever came up with this Maudsley method FBT clearly has zero understanding, A, of eating disorders, and B, of the combination with autism and demand avoidance. Because
but maybe
if
you can say something, about
if you did understand
evidence.
it, you would not create this and then call it fucking evidence-based.
But maybe you can say something about this, because we talked about it a lot, right? Because there is this book by Lagrange and Locke, and they say it's evidence-based, but maybe you can tell more about this evidence too, because it's really important.
Well, yeah, because the evidence, I mean, I don't know the exact chapter, but I actually explain this all in my book, why the evidence-based is actually just a freaking scam. Because this so-called evidence is one of the criteria for the studies that they claimed to be, evidence-based, was that the people who had eating disorders were not allowed to qualify for the study. Basically, the people with eating disorders were not allowed to have any like comorbid mental health issues. So they weren't allowed to have anxiety, they weren't allowed to have depression, they weren't allowed to be autistic, they weren't allowed to be any of these other things. They were just allowed to have an eating disorder. And I'm like, in what instance does an eating disorder occur by itself, right?
Right.
So with that being said, this evidence is based on 0.00001, if not even less percent of the population, making it really questionable how reliable such evidence is to the majority of people with eating disorders.
Right. So this touches upon, or this transitions to my experience with that Facebook group, right?
Yes.
I was in this eating disorder Facebook group, and like, why was I still in there? Because I'm still always, when there's a parent in need, or I'm also in this WhatsApp group, and I'm still intrigued with everything happening, and when I would like to help and shed my light and help other parents. So anyway, in this group there was a desperate mom who posted this post about her adult anorexic daughter, and maybe she was 18 or 19, and she had run away to her aunt.
Oh, that's classic.
And she even shared like the note that her daughter wrote, like, I'm not coming back. I don't want to do this FBT, and I'll come back when you come to your senses. Basically, she tells her parents.
I mean, kudos to you, girl, who wrote that, because that is very correct.
So I read that and I thought, wow, that could have been Livia who wrote that.
Totally. That's why I'm like, bravo.
Yeah. And so I posted underneath that, well, I'm so sorry, but maybe it's the better thing, because this parent was desperate, right? Because she was caught in this, like, we have to do FBT because the people say so.
Yeah, the professionals say so.
So I posted that maybe the best thing for her was to listen to her daughter, although you have to be careful, right? Because you can't tell
Yeah.
another parent that you listen to your daughter. I did it very much in a way that it was my experience that maybe if something doesn't work, like if it's met with such resistance, then maybe you have to find an alternative way. And I said, at least that's how it worked for my daughter, that we found an alternate way. And then I got this message from the admin in that
Well,
group, and he
one
said,
thing I want to add that you
yeah,
forgot to say is I remember you wrote as part of your message, perhaps you can read my daughter's book. And
right,
then
I was going to say that.
and then she came back with the whole marketing
Right.
inappropriate, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly. So I shared your book, and because the other, no, first I didn't want to do that because I'm kind of hesitant about, like, look at me. It's like me going somewhere and bringing my CD, you know?
The police
So,
officer, yeah,
but
guys, whoever's listening to this, we have to share this funny
you,
story. My mom got held over by a police officer once, and she goes, "Do you want my CD?" And he goes, "Do you know that it's illegal to bribe an officer?"
yeah, no, because I was speeding because I was on the way to a gig and I was gonna run late. So I said, I'm gonna run late for my gig, but you can have my CD.
Do you know it's
Anyway.
illegal to bribe an officer?
So anyway, but I didn't bring up your book immediately in that group because then, of course, a lady came, well, may we ask what helped you? And I said, well, you can, instead of writing this whole story, I said, you can read it in my daughter's book.
Mm-hmm.
And I shared your book to be helpful and to give empowerment.
Yeah.
But then the admin and a bunch of parents, they all lashed out at me that I wasn't willing to do the hard work of FBT. And it's hard and it's cruel and it's excruciating, but you have to go through it. I wasn't able to pick my heart and how bad I
Shoot with
was.
your heart.
And that I was
For anyone who doesn't get the
shamelessly,
reference,
no, no,
that's
no.
what Keandra said. That's what Keandra said.
And how bad I was, and that I was shamelessly self-promoting your book, like self-promoting your book. And then she blocked me from the group. So as if I have any motive, right?
Right.
As a parent, having gone through all this in my life, then to help people with my own experience or to make them expand their mind. I felt terrible after it. But what can you do? This is the world we live in, unfortunately. Polarized and unreceptive
and that's
canceling.
Freaking cancel culture. Yeah, and that's exactly where that confirmation bias comes in of like this person who threw you out of the group and all these people who lashed out at you, it's their identity. They have like attached this like FBT is the only way. It's evidence-based. It must work. And then even if it like proves and gives evidence that it's not working, they're unwilling to accept that. So they're going to keep fighting and say, no, it's the only way. It's evidence-based. But you know what you
And I didn't even
persists.
say it wouldn't work because I'm not even saying that it will never work because maybe it does work for some people.
Right. No,
but I was just saying to that, I was saying to that lady, if it doesn't work, then it is my experience that when something isn't working and it's met with such resistance, then there must be something else in your child that, that needs to be. It's not like you have to go through something. That also brings us to the next topic of coercion. Any coercion, I think, in your mindset when you have an eating disorder is bad.
Well, I mean, like even just in general, separate from eating disorders, I don't ever see a situation in which coercion is appropriate.
Right.
Because humans are autonomous beings. So if you're going to coerce us to do anything, even people who don't have demand avoidance and are like neat little people who listen to rules and follow instructions, we don't like to be forced into anything. That's the reason why, these people that have like NG tubes stuffed down their nose, are traumatized and end up having worsening eating disorders after. Because again, you're taking away the autonomy. You're taking away one of the basically vital human needs of human existence is to feel like we have autonomy.
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't fit in any case. And I'm so upset that this is being used in ED and in other mental health situations and even in kids that are just misbehaving, and it's medieval practices that are being applied.
Ghost Noble's book, Dwangbuis. I mean, just even like lobotomies and this kind of stuff. And, having psychiatric patients wear these like jackets without sleeves so that they can't. I mean, I get like almost heart palpitations just thinking about being stuck in that.
Right.
And like instead of trying to figure out like, okay, well, what is underlying this? Like seeing the person as a person rather than a psychiatric sick, ill patient.
Yeah.
Talking to them like, what do you need? What do you want? Like, where do you feel lost? Where do you feel stuck? I mean, again, I actually did a post on Instagram a while ago, and it was a quote, and it was like, if healthcare professionals start treating people with eating disorders like people rather than sick patients, that would go a long way in like
Right.
supporting their recovery.
And it's difficult, right? If people are, self-harming themselves, right?
Yeah.
Or that you want to do something to keep them from doing that, right? Or
Right.
if even physical self-harming or self-harming by not eating. People say here that, well, we have to force this tube down her nose. Often this happens with very nasty, derogatory, and harsh
And
hands,
tying people
right?
to beds. I mean, the fact
Yes,
that
they
that
don't
girl,
say that,
yeah,
but it happens because you haven't seen that happen.
yeah.
But can you imagine, this is an example that I thought of today. Can you imagine that you would lock up and punish a lung cancer patient and force some more chemo into their body just because you found out that they smoked a cigarette?
That's a good example.
Right? Because it makes no sense. It's their own body, right?
Yeah.
But here's a kid who doesn't want to eat. Yes, it's not good for them. Okay. But it's this doing then forcing you down and putting food through your nose while you're screaming because it's the last control you're
It's the
losing.
most traumatizing experience.
It's a complete lack of insight. Yeah, indeed. And a power game of fear and accountability
It's a
often
power game.
too.
And I think also when someone's at their wit's end and it's like, we need to keep them alive, well, it's like putting someone who, is brain dead on like life support. Like, it's only gonna help for as long as they're on the life support. But it's like the moment you take them off, they're gone. And I think that's kind of obviously different, but very similar to this. Like, yeah, you can stuff a tube down someone's throat and force them to be fed, but like they're only going to be fed for as long as they're being coerced. And in fact, the moment you take them off this coercion protocol, they're more likely to refuse anything and restrict even more as they're trying to reclaim this autonomy that was quite literally stolen from them.
Right. Yeah, it's a really hard situation, right? Because even people who have, kids that have to go through this is like they're at wit's end. And it's like, am I really going? This is a whole question, right? That Amelie did this thing in school about this palliative care patient.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
what are you going to do? Like, do you keep someone alive? Is someone, as they say often here, like you're not wilsbekwaam? How do you say it? You're not able to
Wils,
judge. Yeah,
Wils,
that
but
people then they make it a legal thing, right? You're not able to judge for yourself, so we just can stuff the two.
they say wilsbekwaam that it means like mentally incompetent.
Right. So then, and then you have a proxy, and then
Legal
someone can say,
incapacity.
right. But as that article argues, this person is very much competent and knows, right?
Yeah, I remember
anyway.
I remember the quote in that article that was like, if someone with an eating disorder wants to go to treatment and wants to live, they're competent. But if they don't want to live, then suddenly they're incompetent. And then it's the discussion of like, since when was it a moral obligation that you have to live? And I think that is more than the palliative care question is like, if someone literally does not want to live, like, why do we need to force them to? And I think in that sense, it's more about the person's loved ones and caregivers feeling like their ego is being threatened because they were not able to save this person than it is actually about respecting the preference and decision of the person who does not want to live.
Yeah, but I think we're going down a very difficult road, right? Because I don't think a lot of people want to die. It's not their death wish to have anorexia,
No, but I mean, I had anorexia and I didn't want to die.
Right, you didn't want to die. So I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think, I'm not saying
and
that
that's why they then justify giving you this coerced feeding, right? Because this person has to live, wants to live, we need to save them. Because let's suppose, how do you save someone who's at that edge of death, who's so emaciated?
Okay, well, you're just asking me like the biggest question, basically.
I know, it's the biggest question.
That we've been talking for an hour. I think it's good to do a part 2.
Yeah.
Because I'm getting really anxious now because I need to like then answer this whole question like within 1 minute,
definitely.
which I cannot do.
Think about it another time.
Well, I mean, I think about it all the time. What is the best treatment for eating disorders? How do you save someone who will not eat? And my quick answer is like there is no one way. Like, how do you save someone is different for everyone. And I believe it's similar to, it's like asking what is the best way to live life? Well, that question has no answer because there is no best way, because what is life? It's figuring out your way as you go. And that is exactly what recovery from an eating disorder is as you go, figuring out what helps, what doesn't, what works, what doesn't, what you like, what you don't like, what you want, what you don't want. The list is endless. And I don't have anything figured out in my life. There's a lot of things that I know that I like and want, but most of my life I don't have figured out. And I think when we can make peace with that and we can have humility around, that philosophical saying of like, the more you know, the more you don't know, that's when you can, I think, finally make peace with yourself, is that accepting that you're a lifelong learner and you are just growing and learning as you go. And there's no wrong decisions. There's no wrong ways. There's only your way. And your way will lead you closer and closer to what works and what aligns. And anyways, I feel like that's a great note to end on. We're all lifelong learners and growing, and failure cannot coexist with responsibility. I think that's a very important thing to say.
Say that again.
Failure cannot coexist with responsibility.
Failure cannot coexist. Oh, so you mean if you're responsible for
as long as you're
actions?
taking responsibility for your actions, you cannot be failing.
Right. And you're learning.
Yeah. And someone who's learning cannot be failing.
Exactly. It's so beautiful.
Well, Mama, it was so wonderful having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. I have no doubt that parents are going to get so much out of this. So, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back for part 2 soon.
Yeah, to the parents, that there is so much hope, even if you're feeling hopeless, because we were there, and look at us now.
Yeah.
I hope that provides hope. Trust and believe in your child.
Yeah. And if you want to read our full story, well, at least my full story, you can grab your copy of my book, Rainbow Girl, either as an ebook, paperback, or audiobook, recorded by yours truly. And with that said, goodbye, everyone, and we'll catch you later.
Just one foot in front of the other, and you'll see around the corner soon.
This podcast has been recorded by your host, Liv. This podcast has been edited by my small but mighty Live Label Free team, and the beautiful song One Foot in Front of the Other that you are now listening to was written and recorded by my beautiful mom, Louise Alexandra. I am so grateful for my team and everyone who supports Live Label Free. Together, we are always stronger.